The dusty streets of Fort Garland, Colorado, were never meant to witness the kind of desperation that drove Felicity Caldwell to sleep behind the mercantile store. But there she was in the autumn of 1878, curled beneath a threadbare blanket that did nothing to keep out the mountain chill. Thomas Dalton noticed her on a Tuesday morning when he came to town to sell cattle. He was a rancher with calloused hands and honest eyes, 26 years old, and weathered beyond his years from hard work under the Colorado sun. The woman behind the store couldn't have been much younger than him, maybe 23 or 24, with tangled auburn hair, and a face that would have been beautiful if not for the hollowness in her cheeks and the shadows under her eyes. She was trying to make herself invisible, pressed against the back wall of the building as if she could somehow merge with the wooden planks. Thomas stood there for a moment, holding the reins of his horse, unsure what to say. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Morning, miss." Felicity flinched, her green eyes going wide with alarm. She scrambled to her feet, clutching that pitiful blanket around her shoulders. "I was just leaving. I did not mean to cause trouble." "You are not causing trouble." Thomas kept his voice gentle, the way he might speak to a spooked horse. "Have you eaten today?" She looked at him with such wariness that it made his chest ache. "That is none of your concern." "Maybe not, but I am asking anyway." He gestured toward the main street. "There is a restaurant just down the way. Nothing fancy, but the food is hot and filling." "I cannot pay you back. I am not asking you to." Thomas took a step closer, slow and careful. Now that he was nearer, he could see the way her dress hung loose on her frame, how the fabric was torn in places and mended poorly in others. "When was the last time you had a proper meal?" Felicity's chin trembled, but she lifted it defiantly. "I managed just fine." "That was not what I asked." For a long moment they stood in the alley behind the mercantile, the morning sun beginning to warm the air around them. Thomas could hear the sounds of the town waking up, horses whinnying, shopkeepers opening their doors, someone hammering metal in the blacksmith's forge down the street. 3 days, Felicity finally whispered. "Maybe 4. I lose track sometimes." Thomas felt something shift in his chest, a protective instinct he had not experienced since his younger sister had died of fever 5 years ago. "Come on, let me buy you breakfast at least." "Why?" The question came out sharp, defensive. "What do you want from me?" He met her eyes directly, letting her see the truth in his. "Nothing. I just cannot stand the thought of anyone going hungry when I have the means to help." Felicity studied his face for what felt like an eternity. Thomas stood still under her scrutiny, letting her take her time. He could see the war playing out behind her eyes, pride battling with desperate hunger. "Just breakfast," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "Nothing more. Just breakfast," Thomas agreed. The restaurant was a small establishment run by a widow named Mrs. Henderson, who took one look at Felicity and immediately brought out extra portions without being asked. Thomas ordered steak and eggs for both of them, along with fresh bread and coffee so strong it could wake the dead. Felicity ate slowly at first, as if she had forgotten how, but then hunger overtook her caution and she devoured everything on her plate. Thomas pretended not to notice, keeping his attention on his own food and making idle conversation about the weather and the upcoming winter. "You are from around here?" he asked when she finally sat back, looking more human than she had in the alley. "No, I came from St. Louis." Felicity wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup. "I was supposed to meet someone here, but he never showed up." "Someone, a man I was meant to marry." Her laugh was bitter. "We corresponded for months. He sent me money for the train ticket, said he owned a successful ranch and wanted a wife. When I arrived 2 months ago, there was no one waiting at the station. I asked around town, used the name he had given me in his letters. No one had ever heard of him." Thomas felt anger kindle in his gut, He lied to you. About everything, apparently. Felicity took a sip of coffee. The money he sent was real enough, but I used all of it to get here. I had sold everything I owned in St. Louis, burned every bridge to come west to a man who did not exist. Your family back home, dead. My parents passed years ago, and my brother died in the war. She set down the cup, her fingers trembling slightly. I had nothing left in St. Louis except debts and bad memories. The letters from my supposed fiancé seemed like a chance for a new start. I was such a fool. You were trusting. That is not the same thing as being a fool. It feels the same when you are sleeping in alleys and begging for scraps. Mrs. Henderson came by to refill their coffee, giving Felicity a sympathetic look. The older woman had been kind to her on the few occasions Felicity had managed to earn a few coins doing odd jobs, always adding a bit extra to whatever food she could afford. Thomas waited until they were alone again before speaking. "What have you been doing for work?" "Whatever I can find. Washing dishes, scrubbing floors, mending clothes. But there are not many jobs in a town this size, and the respectable women here do not want someone like me around their husbands." Felicity's voice was flat, resigned. "I cannot afford a room anywhere, so I sleep wherever I can find shelter. Most nights that means behind the mercantile or in the livery stable if the owner does not notice me." "The livery stable," Thomas repeated, shocked. "In this weather?" "It is warmer than outside." He sat back in his chair, his mind racing. The decent thing would be to help her find work, maybe talk to some of the other ranchers about whether they needed help with cooking or cleaning. But even as he thought it, Thomas knew that would not be enough. A single woman with no money and no family was vulnerable in ways that made his stomach turn. Without protection, without a name that meant something in this territory, Felicity would always be one step away from disaster. The idea that came to him was insane. He had known this woman for less than an hour, but Thomas had learned young that sometimes the right thing was not the careful thing. "I have a proposal," he said slowly, "and I want you to hear me out before you say anything." Felicity's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What kind of proposal?" "The legal kind. Marriage." He held up a hand when she started to protest. "Not a real one, not in the way that matters, but in name only to give you protection. My ranch is successful enough that I can provide for both of us. You would have your own room, your own space. No expectations, no obligations except the paper we would sign." She stared at him as if he had lost his mind. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious. You do not even know me. I could be a criminal. I could be insane. Are you either of those things?" "No, but that is not the point." Felicity leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Why would you do this? What could you possibly gain from tying yourself to a homeless woman you found behind a store?" Thomas considered the question carefully. "My ranch is about 10 miles from here. It is a good piece of land with water rights and enough grazing for a substantial herd. I built the house myself 3 years ago, and it is bigger than I need for just one person. But the neighboring ranchers and some of the townsfolk have been pushing me to marry, saying a man my age should have a wife and children. There is a woman in particular, the daughter of another rancher, whose father has made it clear he expects a proposal. You do not want to marry her." "I do not want to marry anyone," Thomas said honestly. "Not after watching my parents' miserable marriage. But Sarah Whitmore and her father are persistent, and I am tired of the pressure. If I had a wife already, they would have to back off. So I would be a shield. A way to protect yourself from unwanted attention. And I would be giving you the same protection in return. My name, my home, my resources. You would be safe, Felicity. You would have food and shelter and a future that does not involve sleeping in stables." She shook her head slowly. "This is crazy. Maybe, But is it any crazier than your situation now? Felicity opened her mouth, then closed it again. Thomas could see her thinking, weighing her very limited options. He knew he was taking advantage of her desperation, but he also knew that his offer was genuine. He would not touch her, would not demand anything from her except the appearance of a marriage when others were watching. "Your own room," she said finally. "You promise?" "I promise. The house has 3 bedrooms. You can have your choice of the 2 spare ones, and I will put a lock on the door if it makes you feel safer." "And if I want to leave," Thomas hesitated. "I would not stop you, but I would ask that you give it some time, at least through the winter. The mountain passes get dangerous when the snow comes, and I would hate to think of you trying to make your way to another town in those conditions. You are asking me to commit to months with a stranger. I am asking you to accept help from someone who wants to give it." He met her eyes. "I know you have no reason to trust me, but I swear on my sister's grave that I will not hurt you. This is exactly what I said it is, nothing more and nothing less." Felicity's hands were shaking again, but this time Thomas thought it might not be from hunger or cold. She looked down at her coffee cup, at the last dregs going cold at the bottom. "I do not deserve this," she whispered. "What?" "I do not deserve this kind of charity. I made stupid choices. I trusted the wrong person. I should have been smarter, should have known better." Her voice cracked. "I do not deserve to be rescued like some damsel in a story." Thomas reached across the table slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, he gently placed his hand over hers. Her fingers were cold despite the warm cup she had been holding. "Everyone deserves a chance to start over," he said quietly. "Everyone deserves basic kindness and safety. You made a mistake trusting someone who lied to you, but that does not mean you deserve to suffer for it forever." A tear slid down Felicity's cheek, then another. She brushed them away angrily with her free hand. "You do not know anything about me, about the things I have done. Then tell me why you think you do not deserve help." She was quiet for a long moment, and Thomas thought she might not answer. But then she took a shaky breath and began to speak. "My brother died at Gettysburg. He was only 19, and he joined up because he believed in the cause, believed in freeing people from bondage. When news of his death came, my mother just gave up. She stopped eating, stopped speaking. She died 6 months later, and the doctors said it was her heart, but I knew better. She died of grief." Felicity pulled her hand away from Thomas's, wrapping her arms around herself. "My father lasted another year before the drink took him. He had always been fond of whiskey, but after losing my brother and mother, it consumed him. I found him one morning, dead in his chair with an empty bottle in his hand. I am sorry," Thomas said, meaning it. "I had to sell the house to pay his debts. There was nothing left, not even my mother's wedding ring. I was 21 years old and completely alone, so I did what I had to do to survive." She looked up at him, her eyes hard. "Do you understand what I am saying?" Thomas thought about the implications, about what a young woman alone in a city might have to do to keep herself fed and housed. He thought about the judgment she must have faced, the shame that society would have heaped upon her for making choices that men never had to make. "I understand that you survived," he said, "and there is no shame in that. The church would disagree. Respectable society would disagree. I am not the church, and I am not respectable society. I am just a rancher who has seen enough of life to know that judging someone for their past is a waste of time." Thomas leaned back in his chair. "Whatever you did in St. Louis stays in St. Louis. Out here, you can be whoever you want to be. Just like that, just like that." Felicity studied him for a long moment, and Thomas let her. He knew his offer was unconventional, probably improper by most standards, but he had meant every word. He had the means to help her, and it felt like the right thing to do, even if he could not fully explain why. "If I say yes," Felicity said slowly, "what happens next? We go talk to the judge. Fort Garland is small enough that we can probably get him to marry us today if we explain the situation. Then we head to my ranch, get you settled in, and figure out the rest as we go." Just like that. Just like that, she laughed, a sound that was half sob. "You are either the kindest man I have ever met or the most foolish." "Probably both," Thomas admitted. "But the offer stands. You can have my name, my protection, and a home. No strings attached except the ones we both agree to." Felicity was quiet for so long that Thomas thought she might refuse. He would not blame her if she did. The whole thing sounded insane when he said it out loud. But then she took a deep breath and nodded. "All right. Yes, I will marry you, Thomas Dalton." The relief that flooded through him was surprising in its intensity. "You will not regret this." "I hope you are right." They finished their coffee, and Thomas paid Mrs. Henderson, who gave them both a knowing look but said nothing. Outside, the morning had fully arrived, and Fort Garland was busy with people going about their daily business. Thomas untied his horse from the post where he had left it and turned to Felicity. "The judge's office is just down the street. Are you ready?" Felicity looked down at her worn dress, at the way the hem was mud-stained and torn. "I look terrible. This is not how anyone should get married." "Wait here," Thomas said. He tied his horse again and walked into the mercantile. 10 minutes later he emerged with a wrapped package. "Here. There is a hotel across the street. Go get cleaned up and put this on. I will wait." Felicity took the package with trembling hands. "You did not have to do this. I know, but I wanted to." She disappeared into the hotel, and Thomas waited outside with his horse, ignoring the curious looks from passers-by. Half an hour later, Felicity emerged wearing a simple blue dress that actually fit her properly, her hair brushed and pinned back neatly. The transformation was remarkable. She was beautiful, Thomas realized with a start. Truly beautiful. "Better?" she asked, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. "You look lovely," Thomas said honestly, and watched a faint blush color her cheeks. Judge Warren was a practical man in his 60s who had been settling disputes and performing marriages in Fort Garland since the town was founded. He listened to Thomas's explanation with raised eyebrows but no real judgment. "You understand that this is a legal contract," the judge said. "Once you are married, you are married. It is not something to be entered into lightly." "We understand," Thomas said. "And you, Miss Caldwell, you are entering into this marriage of your own free will." "I am," Felicity said, her voice stronger than Thomas expected. "Well then, I suppose I have married couples for stranger reasons." Judge Warren pulled out the necessary papers. "You will need witnesses. Let me call my clerk and his wife." The ceremony itself was brief and businesslike. Thomas and Felicity stood side by side in the judge's office while he recited the traditional words. When it came time to exchange vows, Thomas's voice was steady and sure. Felicity's wavered only slightly. "You have a ring?" Judge Warren asked. Thomas had not thought that far ahead. "No, I do not. Use this for now." The judge handed him a simple brass ring from his desk drawer. "It belonged to my late wife. She would have wanted it to help start a new marriage, even an unusual one." Thomas slipped the ring onto Felicity's finger. It was slightly too large, but she curled her hand to keep it from falling off. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I pronounce you husband and wife." Judge Warren closed his book. "You may kiss the bride if you are so inclined." Thomas looked at Felicity, a question in his eyes. She gave the smallest nod, and he leaned in to press a chaste kiss to her cheek. Her skin was soft and smelled faintly of the lavender soap from the hotel. They signed the papers. The clerk and his wife witnessed them, and just like that, Thomas and Felicity were married. The whole thing had taken less than 15 minutes. Outside the judge's office, Felicity looked down at the brass ring on her finger. This does not feel real. It is real enough. You are Felicity Dalton now. That name means something in these parts. It means you are protected. Felicity Dalton, she repeated softly, testing out the sound of it. It is strange having a different name. You will get used to it. Thomas gestured toward his horse. We should head to the ranch. It is about a 2-hour ride and I want to get there before dark. I have never been very good with horses, Felicity admitted. That is all right. You can ride with me. Thomas mounted first, then reached down to help Felicity up. She settled in front of him, side saddle, and he wrapped one arm around her waist to keep her steady. She was tense at first, clearly uncomfortable with the closeness, but as they started moving, she relaxed slightly against him. They rode out of Fort Garland, heading west, into the vast expanse of the San Luis Valley. The landscape was stunning, with the Sangre de Cristo Mountains rising to the east and the San Juan Mountains to the west. The valley floor was a patchwork of golden grassland and scrub brush, dotted here and there with stands of cottonwood trees. It is beautiful, Felicity said softly. Wait until you see the ranch. The house sits near a creek with a view of the mountains. When the sun sets, the peaks turn red and gold like they are on fire. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves and the wind rustling through the grass. Thomas could feel Felicity's heart beating against his arm, could feel the way she gradually stopped holding herself so rigidly. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a while. "Of course. Why did you really do this? And please do not just say it was the right thing. There has to be more to it than that." Thomas considered his answer carefully. "I told you about my sister. Her name was Margaret, and she was 2 years younger than me. When she died, I was 21 and felt completely helpless. I could not save her, could not do anything except watch her slip away. And then my parents blamed each other for her death, blamed themselves, blamed God. They made each other miserable for years until my father finally left." He paused, remembering. "After that, I decided I would never let myself feel that helpless again. If I saw someone who needed help and I had the ability to give it, I would. No hesitation, no second guessing, because the alternative, standing by and doing nothing, is something I cannot live with." "So I am your good deed," Felicity said, but there was no bitterness in her voice, just understanding. "You are a person who needed help, and I am a person who could give it. That is all this has to be. But it is not all it is it? You said the other ranchers have been pushing you to marry. This benefits you too." "Yes," Thomas admitted. "It does. I suppose that makes us even." Felicity laughed quietly. "I suppose it does." The Dalton Ranch came into view as the sun was beginning its descent toward the western peaks. True to Thomas's word, the house was situated beautifully. A sturdy 2-story structure made of timber and stone with a wide porch wrapping around the front. A creek ran nearby, lined with cottonwood trees that rustled in the evening breeze. Beyond the house were several outbuildings, a barn, corrals, and what looked like a bunkhouse. "This is all yours?" Felicity asked, wonder in her voice. "Mine in the banks," Thomas said with a wry smile. "But I have been making good progress on paying down the mortgage. Another few years of good cattle sales, and it will be completely mine." He helped her down from the horse and led her toward the house. The front door was unlocked, and they stepped into a main room that was larger than Felicity's entire house in St. Louis had been. The furniture was simple but well made, clearly built for function rather than beauty. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and windows on the opposite side offered that promised view of the mountains. "The kitchen is through here," Thomas said, leading her into an adjoining room. And upstairs are the bedrooms. Let me show you." He carried her bag, which held only her old dress and the blanket she had been sleeping under, up the stairs. 3 doors opened off the landing. Thomas opened the first one. "This is my room," he said, giving her a view of a simple bedroom with a large bed, a dresser, and not much else. "This one is the spare," he continued, opening the second door to reveal a smaller but still comfortable room with a bed, a wardrobe, and a window overlooking the creek. "And this one," he opened the third door, "has the better view." The third bedroom was slightly larger than the second, with windows on 2 walls offering views of both the mountains and the creek. The bed had a thick quilt in shades of blue and green, and there was a rocking chair in one corner. "Take whichever one you prefer," Thomas said. "I can move the furniture around however you want." Felicity walked into the third room, trailing her fingers along the windowsill. "This one, if that is all right." "It is more than all right. It is your room now." Thomas set her bag on the bed. "There should be clean linens in the wardrobe. I will get a lock put on the door tomorrow when I go back to town." "You are really going to do that?" "I said I would, did I not?" Felicity turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. For you to tell me what you really want in exchange for all this." Thomas held her gaze steadily. "I have told you what I want. A marriage in name only, to keep the Whitmores and others from bothering me. Beyond that, I want you to be comfortable here, to feel safe. That is all. What if I change my mind? What if a few months from now I decide I want to leave? Then you leave. I am not going to keep you here against your will." Thomas leaned against the doorframe. "But I meant what I said about waiting until spring. The passes are already starting to get dangerous with early snow. If you tried to leave now, you might not make it to the next town. So I am trapped here, at least for the winter." "Not trapped, protected. There is a difference." Felicity sank down onto the bed, suddenly looking exhausted. "I do not know if I can trust that difference." Thomas's heart ached at the resignation in her voice. "Then do not trust it yet. Just take things one day at a time. Tomorrow you can explore the ranch, see the livestock, meet the hands who work here. Get a feel for the place. And if at any point you feel unsafe or uncomfortable, you tell me and we will figure out a solution." "All right," she nodded slowly. "All right. Are you hungry? I can make us some dinner. You cook." "Well enough to keep myself alive. It is not fancy, but it is edible." A small smile touched Felicity's lips. "That is more than I can usually say for my cooking." They went back downstairs, and Thomas set about making a simple meal of salt pork, beans, and cornbread. Felicity watched him work, sitting at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a cup of water. "How many people work here?" she asked. 3 full-time hands, 4 during cattle drives. They stay in the bunkhouse most of the time, come up to the main house for meals occasionally. Good men, all of them. They have been with me since I started the ranch. Will they wonder about me, about us? Probably. But I will tell them the truth, that we got married in town today. They do not need to know the details of our arrangement." Felicity was quiet while Thomas finished cooking. They ate at the table, the silence between them more comfortable than it had been earlier. When they were done, Thomas washed the dishes while Felicity dried them, falling into an easy rhythm that felt almost natural. "I should probably get some sleep," Felicity said when the last dish was put away. "It has been a long day, of course. There is water in the pitcher upstairs, and if you need anything during the night, I am right across the hall." She nodded and started toward the stairs, then paused. "Thomas." "Yes, thank you for all of this. Even if I still do not understand why you did it, I am grateful." "You are welcome, Felicity." He watched her climb the stairs, heard the soft click of her bedroom door closing. Then he banked the fire in the main room and headed up to his own room. As he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Thomas wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. He barely knew this woman, and yet he had tied himself to her legally and permanently. But then he thought about her sleeping in that stable, about the desperation in her eyes when he had first seen her, and he knew he would make the same choice again. The next morning, Thomas woke before dawn as he always did. He dressed quietly and went downstairs to make coffee, not expecting Felicity to be up for hours yet. But when he entered the kitchen, he found her already there, dressed in her new blue dress, attempting to work the stove. "You are up early," he said, surprised. Felicity jumped, nearly dropping the pot she was holding. "I wanted to make breakfast, to earn my keep, but I cannot figure out how to get this thing to heat properly." Thomas bit back a smile and came over to help her. "The damper needs to be adjusted here, and you have to make sure the wood is dry or it will smoke. Here, let me show you." He stood behind her, reaching around to demonstrate how to work the stove properly. Felicity was very still, and Thomas suddenly realized how close they were standing. He stepped back quickly, clearing his throat. "Sorry, I should have just explained it. No, it is all right. I need to learn." Felicity adjusted the damper the way he had shown her. "I want to be useful here. I do not want to just be some charity case you have to take care of." "You are my wife," Thomas said. "Not a charity case, in name only. The name is the part that matters to everyone else, and if it makes you feel better to help around the house, I will not stop you, but you do not owe me anything, Felicity. Please understand that." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "I will try." They made breakfast together, working around each other in the kitchen with surprising ease. Felicity was not a good cook, as she had warned, but she was willing to learn, and Thomas found he enjoyed teaching her. They ate together as the sun rose, painting the mountains in shades of pink and gold. "Can I really explore the ranch today?" Felicity asked. "Absolutely. Let me introduce you to the hands first, then you can wander wherever you like. Just be careful near the cattle. Some of them are not used to people and might startle." After breakfast, Thomas led Felicity out to the barn where his 3 ranch hands were already at work. The men looked up curiously as they approached. "Boys, I want you to meet my wife, Felicity. We got married in town yesterday." Thomas put a hand on the small of Felicity's back, a gesture that he hoped looked natural. "Felicity, this is James, Robert, and young Henry." James was the oldest, a grizzled man in his 50s with a gray beard and kind eyes. Robert was around Thomas's age, tall and quiet. Henry could not have been more than 19, all gangly limbs and nervous energy. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Dalton," James said, tipping his hat. The other 2 followed suit. "Please call me Felicity," she said with a smile that Thomas noticed did not quite reach her eyes. "When did this happen, boss?" Robert asked. "Last we heard, you were fighting off Sarah Whitmore with a stick." Thomas laughed. "Things moved fast. I met Felicity in town and knew she was the one. No point in waiting when you are sure." He felt Felicity stiffen slightly beside him, but she kept the smile on her face. Thomas can be very persuasive. The hands chatted with them for a few more minutes before returning to their work. Thomas showed Felicity around the rest of the ranch, pointing out the different buildings and explaining what they were used for. She listened intently, asking questions that showed she was genuinely interested. "The cattle are in the far pasture right now," Thomas said as they walked along the creek. "We will drive them closer to the ranch as winter approaches, makes it easier to keep an eye on them and provide supplemental feed when the grass dies back." "How many do you have?" "About 300 head right now. I am hoping to increase that number next year if the market stays strong." Felicity was quiet for a moment, watching the water flow past. "I know nothing about ranching, about this life. You will learn. It is not as complicated as it seems at first." "Everything seems complicated to me right now," She sat down on a fallen log near the creek bank. Yesterday morning I woke up behind a store, hungry and cold and alone. Now I am married to a man I barely know, living in a beautiful house on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. It does not feel real. Thomas sat down beside her, careful to leave space between them. I imagine it is overwhelming. That is one word for it. Felicity picked up a small stone and tossed it into the water. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. You said your parents had a miserable marriage. What made it so bad? Thomas thought about how to answer. They never really loved each other. My father married my mother because it was expected of him, and she married him because he was a good prospect. They did their duty, had children, ran a household. But there was no warmth between them, no real affection. When Margaret died, they did not turn to each other for comfort. They just blamed and resented until they could not stand to be in the same room. That sounds terrible. It was. I swore I would never marry unless it was for love, real love. But then I realized I do not know if I am capable of that kind of feeling. I have never felt anything approaching it for any woman I have met. Felicity glanced at him. So you decided to marry someone you do not love to avoid marrying someone else you do not love. When you put it that way, it does sound absurd, Thomas admitted with a self-deprecating smile. But at least with you, we are honest about what this is. There are no false expectations, no pretending to feel something we do not. That seems better to me than a marriage built on lies and duty. I suppose that is one way to look at it. Felicity tossed another stone into the water. I have never been in love either. I thought I might have been once with a boy back in St. Louis before the war, but he died at Shiloh, and I never got the chance to find out if what I felt was real. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the water flow past and listening to the birds in the cottonwood trees. Thomas found himself studying Felicity's profile, the delicate line of her jaw, the way the morning light caught the red highlights in her auburn hair. She was lovely, he thought again, and sad. There was a deep sadness in her that he recognized because he carried his own version of it. "Do you miss St. Louis?" he asked. "I miss what it represented. Home, family, a sense of belonging somewhere, but the actual city, no. There were too many bad memories there by the end. Colorado can be your home now, if you let it." Felicity looked at him, her green eyes searching his face. "You really mean that, do not you? This is not some elaborate scheme or trick. You genuinely want to help me." "I genuinely want to help you," Thomas confirmed. "I know that is hard to believe after what you have been through, but I promise you, Felicity, I am exactly who I appear to be. No hidden motives, no secret agendas. I want to believe you. Then try, just try and see what happens." She nodded slowly, and Thomas felt something shift between them. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it, the possibility of it. They spent the rest of the morning exploring the ranch. Felicity was particularly taken with the horses, standing at the corral fence and watching them with obvious delight. "I always wanted to learn to ride properly," she said. "Not just sitting side saddle, but really ride. I can teach you if you want. We have a gentle mare who would be perfect for learning." "Really? Really? We can start this afternoon if you are up for it." The enthusiasm in Felicity's eyes was the most genuine emotion Thomas had seen from her since they met. It transformed her face, making her look younger and less burdened. "I would like that very much," she said. That afternoon, true to his word, Thomas brought out the gentle mare and began teaching Felicity the basics of riding. She was nervous at first, but her determination outweighed her fear. By the time the sun started to set, she was walking the horse around the corral with increasing confidence. "You are a natural," Thomas called out encouragingly. "I am terrified," Felicity called back, but she was smiling. They ended the lesson as the sky turned red and gold. the mountains living up to Thomas's description. Felicity slid down from the horse with Thomas's help, her legs shaky from the unfamiliar exercise. "That was wonderful," she said, breathless and flushed. "Can we do it again tomorrow?" "Every day if you want. We will have you galloping across the valley before winter comes." They walked back to the house together, falling into easy conversation about horses and riding. Thomas found himself enjoying her company more than he had expected. Felicity was intelligent and curious, with a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard and made him laugh. Dinner that night was another collaborative effort, with Felicity improving slightly under Thomas's patient instruction. Afterward, they sat in the main room, Thomas reviewing his account books while Felicity examined the small collection of books he kept on a shelf. "You have read all of these?" she asked, running her finger along the spines. "Most of them." "I am not much of a reader, but long winters do not leave many other options for entertainment. I used to love reading. Before everything fell apart, I would spend hours at the library." Felicity pulled down a volume of poetry. "May I, of course. Anything here is yours to use." She settled into the chair by the fireplace, curling her legs under her and opening the book. Thomas tried to focus on his accounts, but he kept finding his gaze drawn to her, to the way the firelight played across her features, to the small smile that touched her lips as she read. This was dangerous, he realized. He was already starting to care about her beyond the simple arrangement they had made. Already starting to wonder what it would be like if their marriage were real in every sense of the word. Thomas forced his attention back to his books, to the columns of numbers that needed tallying. He could not afford to develop feelings for Felicity. That was not what they had agreed to. She had made it clear that she did not believe she deserved kindness, let alone anything deeper. And he had no right to push for more than she was willing to give. But as the days turned into weeks, Thomas found it increasingly difficult to maintain that emotional distance. Felicity was becoming part of the fabric of his daily life in ways he had not anticipated. She helped with the cooking and cleaning, slowly improving at both. She continued her riding lessons and proved to be as good as Thomas had said, progressing from walking to trotting to cantering with determined focus. She also began to help with the ranch work in small ways. She would bring water out to the hands working in the corrals, or help Thomas with the bookkeeping since her penmanship was better than his. She mended clothes and tended a small garden she started near the house, determined to contribute something of value. More than that, though, she became someone Thomas looked forward to seeing at the end of each day. Someone whose thoughts he wanted to hear, whose laugh he found himself trying to coax out with terrible jokes and exaggerated stories. Someone who made the big, empty house feel like an actual home. For her part, Felicity seemed to be settling into life on the ranch as well. The hollowness in her cheeks filled out as she ate regular meals. The shadows under her eyes faded with proper rest. She smiled more easily, laughed more freely. The wariness that had defined her in those early days gradually softened into something that looked almost like contentment. But there were still moments when Thomas caught her staring out the window with an expression of deep sadness, or when she flinched away from unexpected touches, or when she said things that revealed the depths of her damaged sense of self-worth. One evening about 6 weeks after their wedding, they were sitting together after dinner when Felicity suddenly set down her book and looked at Thomas. "Why have you not tried to kiss me?" she asked bluntly. Thomas was so surprised he nearly spilled his coffee. "What?" "We have been married for 6 weeks. We share a home. We spend every day together, but you have not tried to kiss me or touch me or anything beyond that peck on the cheek at our wedding." Felicity's voice was matter-of-fact, but there was something underneath it that Thomas could not quite identify. "Why?" "Because that was not part of our agreement," Thomas said carefully. "I told you this was a marriage in name only. I meant it. But surely you must want something. Men always want something." Thomas set down his own cup and turned to face her fully. "I am not going to lie and say I have not thought about it. You are a beautiful woman, Felicity, but I gave you my word that I would not expect or demand anything physical from you. That promise means more to me than any passing desire." Felicity looked down at her hands. "What if I want you to?" Thomas's heart stuttered in his chest. What if I want our marriage to be real, in every way?" She looked up at him, her green eyes uncertain but determined. "Would that be all right with you, Felicity?" Thomas moved to sit beside her on the sofa, taking her hand gently. "I need you to be very sure about what you are asking. I do not want you to feel obligated or like you owe me something. That is not what this is." She squeezed his hand. "These past weeks have been the happiest I have been in years. You have been kind and patient and good to me. You make me laugh, you make me feel safe, and I find myself wanting more than just the arrangement we made. More how? A real marriage, a real partnership." Felicity's voice dropped to a whisper. "A real husband." Thomas felt something swell in his chest, something warm and overwhelming. "Are you sure? Because once we cross that line, there is no going back to the way things were. I do not want to go back. I want to move forward. With you." He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face gently in his hand. "I have been falling for you," he admitted quietly. "A little more each day. I tried to keep my distance, but you made it impossible. Really, really. You are brave and strong and funny, and you do not even realize it. You think you do not deserve kindness, but you deserve everything good this world has to offer." Felicity's eyes filled with tears. "I do not know how to believe that." "Then let me show you. Let me spend every day proving to you how worthy you are." He leaned in slowly, still giving her every chance to change her mind. But Felicity met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it was soft and sweet and full of promise. Thomas kissed her gently, pouring all the affection he had been holding back into that single moment of connection. When they finally pulled apart, Felicity was smiling through her tears. "That was nice," Thomas laughed. "Just nice, wonderful, perfect, everything I hoped it would be." She leaned her forehead against his. "I am scared, though. I do not know how to do this, how to be a real wife." "We will figure it out together, one day at a time, just like everything else." He kissed her again, a little deeper this time. "I promise to be patient, to go at whatever pace you need. And if I need you to go very slow, then we will go very slow. We have all the time in the world, Felicity." She kissed him this time, her hands coming up to rest on his shoulders. Thomas wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her closer but still being careful, still letting her set the pace. They stayed like that for a long time, kissing by the firelight, learning the feel and taste of each other. Eventually, Felicity pulled back with a shy smile. "I should probably go to bed, alone for tonight, if that is all right." "Of course it is. Like I said, we go at your pace." She stood, then hesitated. "Thomas, thank you for everything, for seeing something in me worth saving, Felicity." He stood as well, taking both her hands in his. "You saved yourself. I just gave you the space to do it." That night, Thomas lay in his bed thinking about the turn their relationship had taken. He had not expected to fall in love with his wife. Had not expected to want her with an intensity that made his chest ache. But here he was, completely and utterly in love with Felicity Dalton, and hoping that she might come to love him back. The next few weeks were a study in slowly building intimacy. Thomas and Felicity continued to sleep in separate rooms, but they spent more and more time in each other's company. They held hands while walking around the ranch. Thomas kissed her goodbye when he rode out to check on the cattle and kissed her hello when he returned. Felicity began leaving his bedroom door open at night. a silent invitation that Thomas took as permission to check on her before he went to sleep. He would stand in her doorway, watching her raid or brush her hair, and she would smile at him with increasing warmth. Sometimes he would come in and sit on the edge of her bed, and they would talk for hours about everything and nothing. Their pasts, their dreams, their fears. One night, about 10 weeks after their wedding, Felicity set down her brush and looked at Thomas seriously. "I want you to know why I said I did not deserve your help, the full truth of it." Thomas tensed slightly but kept his voice gentle. "You do not have to tell me anything you are not ready to share. I know, but I want to. I need you to understand who I was before I can fully become who I want to be." She took a deep breath and began to speak, telling him about the years after her family died. About how she had tried to find respectable work, but could not. About how the money ran out and she faced a choice between starving and doing things she had been taught to be ashamed of. "I worked in a saloon," Felicity said, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. "Not as a prostitute, but as what they called a percentage girl. I would dance with men, encourage them to buy drinks, and the owner would give me a cut of the profits. But everyone knew that the line between that and selling myself was thin, and that I crossed it a few times when I was desperate enough." Thomas felt anger on her behalf, at a society that would push a young woman into such choices and then judge her for making them. But he kept his voice calm. "Thank you for trusting me with that. You are not disgusted. No, I am heartbroken that you had to go through it and angry at everyone who failed you, but disgusted. Never." Felicity's eyes filled with tears. "I thought it would matter to you. I thought you would see me differently. The only thing I see is a survivor, someone who did what she had to do to stay alive in a world that gave her very few options." Thomas moved closer, taking her hand. "Nothing you have told me changes how I feel about you. If anything, it makes me admire you more." "How can you possibly admire me for that? Because you are still here, still fighting, still hoping for something better. That takes incredible strength, Felicity, more than most people have." She collapsed against him, sobbing into his shoulder. Thomas held her, stroking her hair and murmuring reassurances until the storm of emotion passed. When she finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and tear-stained but also lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. "I love you," she said suddenly. "I did not think I was capable of loving anyone after everything I have been through, but I love you, Thomas Dalton, completely and terrifyingly." Joy flooded through Thomas so intensely it almost hurt. "I love you too, so much that it scares me sometimes. What are we going to do about it?" "We are going to build a life together, a real life with real love and real partnership." Felicity smiled through her tears. "I would like that very much." "Good, because I am not letting you go now. You are stuck with me. I cannot think of anywhere else I would rather be stuck." Thomas kissed her then, deep and passionate, pouring all his love into the connection. Felicity responded with equal fervor, her hands tangling in his hair, her body pressing against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. "I want to be with you," Felicity whispered, "truly with you, as your wife in every sense, but I am still scared. We do not have to do anything tonight or any night until you are ready." "What if I am ready now but still scared?" Thomas pulled back to look at her. "Then we go slow. And if at any point you want to stop, we stop. No questions, no judgment." "You would really do that?" "Felicity, I would do anything for you. Surely you know that by now." She kissed him again, softer this time. "Stay with me tonight, please." Thomas's heart raced, but he kept his voice steady. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. I trust you, Thomas, completely." That night they consummated their marriage with tenderness and care. Thomas was patient and gentle, constantly checking to make sure Felicity was comfortable, that she wanted to continue. And Felicity, despite her fears and her past, gave herself to him with a wholeness that took his breath away. Afterward, they lay tangled together in her bed, Felicity's head resting on Thomas's chest while he traced lazy patterns on her back. "I never knew it could be like that," she said softly. "Kind and gentle and loving. It should always be like that," Thomas said, kissing the top of her head, "full of care and respect. I love you so much it frightens me. I know the feeling, but we will face it together." From that night on, they shared a bed. Felicity moved her things into Thomas's room, and the third bedroom with the beautiful view became a guest room that would eventually serve another purpose. As autumn deepened into winter, Thomas and Felicity settled into married life with surprising ease. They worked side by side during the day, managing the ranch and preparing for the harsh Colorado winter. At night, they would sit by the fire or lie in bed, talking and laughing and making love with increasing confidence and joy. The ranch hands noticed the change in their relationship, the way Thomas and Felicity now touched each other constantly, small affectionate gestures that spoke of genuine love. James commented one day that he had never seen Thomas so happy, and Thomas had to agree. He had not known it was possible to feel this content, this complete. In early December, they rode into Fort Garland for supplies. It was their first trip to town together since their wedding day, and Thomas was quietly anxious about how people would react to his sudden marriage. His fears proved founded when they ran into Sarah Whitmore and her father outside the mercantile. "Thomas Dalton," Sarah said coldly, "I heard you had gotten married, but I did not believe it until now." "Sarah, Mr. Whitmore." Thomas nodded politely, his arm around Felicity's waist. "This is my wife, Felicity." Sarah looked Felicity up and down with obvious disdain. "How charming, and where did you two meet?" "Here in Fort Garland," Thomas said evenly. "How convenient, a whirlwind romance." Sarah's smile was sharp. "Tell me, Mrs. Dalton, what did your family think of such a hasty wedding?" "I have no family," Felicity said quietly. "They are all dead. How tragic." Sarah did not sound sympathetic at all. "And you just happened to stumble into marriage with one of the most successful ranchers in the valley. What extraordinary luck." Thomas felt anger flare in his chest. "That is enough, Sarah." "I am merely making conversation," Sarah said innocently. "Though I suppose people will talk. A sudden marriage to a woman with no family, no background, no prospects. Some might say it seems suspicious." "Then some people should mind their own business," Thomas said coldly. "Now, if you will excuse us, we have shopping to do." He guided Felicity into the mercantile, leaving Sarah and her father on the sidewalk. Once inside, Felicity was shaking slightly. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I did not mean to cause you trouble." "You did not cause anything. Sarah is just bitter because she cannot control me." Thomas cupped her face gently. "Do not let her words hurt you. She does not know anything about us or our life." "But she is right, is she not? People will talk. They will wonder about me, about where I came from. Let them wonder. I do not care what anyone thinks as long as you and I know the truth." Felicity managed a small smile. "You are a good man, Thomas Dalton. And you are an amazing woman, Felicity Dalton. Do not ever forget that." They finished their shopping and headed home, but the encounter with Sarah had unsettled Felicity. Over the next few days, Thomas noticed her becoming quieter, more withdrawn. Finally, he confronted her about it. "Talk to me," he said one evening as they sat by the fire. "What is going on in that head of yours?" Felicity was quiet for a long moment. "What if Sarah is right? What if people think I trapped you into marriage, that I am just some opportunist who took advantage of your kindness? Then people are wrong. But you cannot deny that our marriage started as a business arrangement, that you married me to get the Whitmores off your back." "It started that way," Thomas agreed. "But that is not what it is now. We fell in love, Felicity. Really, truly fell in love. That is not something you can fake or force. I just do not want to be a source of shame for you. You have worked so hard to build your reputation here. Thomas set down his book and pulled Felicity into his lap, making her look at him. Listen to me very carefully. You are not a source of shame. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. I do not care if Sarah Whitmore or anyone else approves. The only opinion that matters is yours and mine. You really mean that? I really mean that. I love you, Felicity. I am proud to be your husband. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know how much you mean to me. Felicity's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. I love you too, so much. They made love that night with a new intensity, as if trying to prove to each other the depth of their feelings. Afterward, as they lay wrapped in each other's arms, Felicity said something that made Thomas's heart soar. I want to have a baby with you. Thomas pulled back to look at her. Really, really. I want to create a family with you. I want to build a future that is ours. Are you sure you are ready for that? Felicity nodded. I am terrified, but I am also more certain than I have ever been about anything. You have given me so much, Thomas. A home, a name, love. I want to give you something in return. I want to give you children. Thomas kissed her deeply. You have already given me everything I could ever want. But if you want children, then we will have children, as many as you want. Let us start with one and see how we manage, Felicity said with a laugh. Winter settled over the ranch in earnest, bringing heavy snows and bitterly cold temperatures. Thomas and Felicity spent most of their time close to the house, venturing out only when necessary to tend the livestock or check on the hands in the bunkhouse. It was a quiet, peaceful time, filled with long nights by the fire and lazy mornings in bed. In late January, Felicity began to suspect she might be pregnant. She did not say anything to Thomas at first, afraid to get his hopes up. But when she missed her second monthly cycle and began feeling nauseous in the mornings, she could not keep it to herself any longer. Thomas, she said one morning as they lay in bed watching the snow fall outside. I think I might be pregnant. Thomas sat up so fast he nearly fell out of bed. What? Really? I am not certain yet, but all the signs are there. Felicity placed a hand on her still flat stomach. We could be having a baby. The joy on Thomas's face was so pure and unfiltered that it brought tears to Felicity's eyes. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight but carefully, as if she might break. This is the best news I have ever received, he said, his voice choked with emotion. You are going to be a mother. We are going to be parents. Are you happy? Happy does not even begin to cover it. I am overjoyed. I am terrified. I am so grateful I could burst. Felicity laughed, the sound full of her own joy and relief. I am all of those things too. They held each other for a long time, talking about the future, about names and nurseries and all the possibilities that lay ahead. Thomas's hand rested on Felicity's stomach, as if he could already feel the life growing there. I am going to take such good care of you, he promised. Both of you. I know you will. You are going to be an amazing father. As winter slowly gave way to spring, Felicity's pregnancy became more obvious. Her belly began to swell, and Thomas treated her like she was made of glass, constantly worrying about her health and comfort. Felicity found it both endearing and occasionally frustrating. I am pregnant, not dying, she told him one day when he tried to stop her from helping with the garden. I can still do things. I know, but I worry. What if something happens? Nothing is going to happen. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. But you are not just any woman. You are my woman, the mother of my child. Forgive me for wanting to protect you. Felicity softened at the genuine concern in his voice. I love that you want to protect me, but you also have to trust that I know my own limits. If I need to rest, I will rest. But until then, I want to keep living my life." Thomas reluctantly agreed, though he still hovered whenever Felicity did anything more strenuous than sitting down. She tolerated his concern with good humor, understanding that it came from a place of love. In April, when the mountain passes finally cleared enough for safe travel, Thomas insisted on bringing a doctor out to the ranch to check on Felicity. The doctor confirmed what they already knew. Felicity was healthy and the pregnancy was progressing normally. The baby was due in late summer. "Everything looks good," the doctor said as he packed up his bag. "Just make sure she gets plenty of rest and good food, and send for me when her time comes." After the doctor left, Thomas pulled Felicity into his arms. "Late summer. We are going to meet our baby in late summer." "Our son or daughter," Felicity said, resting her head on his chest. "I still cannot quite believe this is real sometimes, that I went from sleeping behind a store to carrying my husband's child in less than a year. It is real, and you deserve every bit of happiness you have now." "I am starting to believe that." Finally, the months passed in a blur of preparation. Thomas converted the guest room into a nursery, building a cradle himself with painstaking care. Felicity sewed baby clothes and blankets, her hands growing more skilled with each piece. The ranch hands were excited about the coming addition, James in particular offering advice based on raising his own 5 children. In late August, when the heat lay heavy over the valley and the grasshoppers sang in the fields, Felicity went into labor. Thomas sent one of the hands racing to Fort Garland for the doctor while he tried to keep calm and comfort his wife. "I am scared," Felicity admitted between contractions. "What if something goes wrong?" "Nothing is going to go wrong. You are strong and you are healthy and you are going to do this beautifully." Thomas wiped the sweat from her forehead with a cool cloth. "I am right here with you. I am not going anywhere." The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Thomas stayed by Felicity's side the entire time, holding her hand, encouraging her, supporting her however he could. The doctor arrived after several hours and took charge with calm efficiency. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, Felicity gave one final push and their baby entered the world. The doctor cleaned the infant and wrapped it in a soft blanket before handing it to Thomas. "Congratulations. You have a healthy son." Thomas looked down at the tiny, perfect face of his child and felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. He carried the baby over to Felicity, who was exhausted but smiling. "A boy," she whispered, reaching out to touch the soft, dark hair on the baby's head. "We have a son." "What should we name him?" Thomas asked. They had discussed names for months but never settled on one. Now, looking at their child, Felicity knew immediately, "William, after my brother, if that is all right with you. William Dalton, I love it." Thomas sat on the edge of the bed, the baby cradled carefully in his arms. "Hello, William. Welcome to the world." The baby yawned, his tiny fists waving in the air, and both Thomas and Felicity laughed through their tears. Their son. Their family. Over the next few weeks, they settled into the rhythm of new parenthood. William was a relatively easy baby, sleeping well and eating enthusiastically. Thomas proved to be a devoted father, getting up with Felicity for night feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours just holding his son and marveling at the miracle of him. "I never thought I could love anyone as much as I love you," Thomas told Felicity one night as they watched William sleep in his cradle. "But somehow my heart just keeps expanding." "I know what you mean. I look at him and I cannot believe he is ours, that we made him." Thomas wrapped his arms around Felicity from behind, his hands resting on her stomach. "Thank you for giving me this, for giving me a family. Thank you for saving me, for seeing something worthwhile in a desperate woman behind a store. You saved yourself, remember. I just gave you the space to do it." Felicity turned in his arms to face him. "We saved each other. That is what love is, I think. Two people making each other better and stronger and more whole." "Then we are doing it right," Thomas said, kissing her softly. "Because I am definitely better with you than I ever was without you." As William grew from an infant to a toddler, the ranch prospered. Thomas's hard work and smart decisions paid off, and the Dalton name became synonymous with quality cattle and fair dealing. Felicity proved to have a natural head for business, helping Thomas with the books and correspondence, even negotiating better prices with buyers in Denver. When William was 2 years old, Felicity became pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to a daughter they named Margaret, after Thomas's sister. 2 years after that came another son, James, named for the ranch hand who had become like family to them. The house that had once seemed too large for one lonely cowboy now rang with the sounds of children laughing and playing. The nursery Thomas had built with such care became a playroom, then a bedroom shared by the two boys. A fourth bedroom was added to the house as the family grew. Through it all, Thomas and Felicity's love only deepened. They had their disagreements, of course, their moments of frustration and exhaustion, but they never lost sight of what they meant to each other, of the miracle that had brought them together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Thomas took Felicity back to Fort Garland for a rare day alone. They had dinner at the same restaurant where he had bought her that first breakfast, sitting at the same table if they could manage it. "You remember that day?" Thomas asked as they ate. "You were so suspicious of me, so sure I had some hidden motive. Can you blame me? A strange man offering to buy breakfast for a homeless woman. It seemed too good to be true." And now, Felicity smiled, the expression full of warmth and love. "Now I know it was exactly what it seemed. Kindness from a good man who saw someone in need and chose to help." "You still think you did not deserve it," Thomas said. "Even after all these years, you sometimes get that look in your eyes like you cannot believe this is your life." "I am working on it. Believing that I deserve happiness, that I deserve you and our children and this beautiful life we have built." Felicity reached across the table to take his hand. "You have given me everything, Thomas. A home, a family, a purpose. You have loved me when I could not love myself. That is a gift beyond price. You have given me just as much, more maybe. You have shown me what real love looks like, what a true partnership can be. You have made me a father, given me a family I never thought I would have." Thomas raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I would marry you again tomorrow if given the choice. Every day for the rest of my life." "Then it is a good thing we are already married," Felicity said with a laugh. They finished their dinner and walked through the town together, hand in hand, past the mercantile where Thomas had first found Felicity sleeping in the alley. The building looked the same, but everything else had changed so completely. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you had not noticed me that day," Felicity said quietly. "If you had just ridden past. But I did not. I saw you and I could not unsee you, could not walk away from someone who needed help. Your good heart saved my life. Your strength and courage made a life worth saving." Thomas pulled her close. "We were meant to find each other, Felicity. I truly believe that. All the pain and hardship we both went through was leading us to that moment in the alley. I believe that too. I have to believe it, because the alternative is too heartbreaking to consider." They stood there in the growing dusk, holding each other on the street where their story had begun. Then they rode home together, back to the ranch, and the children and the life they had built from nothing but hope and determination. As the years continued to pass, the Dalton Ranch became one of the most successful in the San Luis Valley. Thomas's reputation for fair dealing and quality livestock grew, and he began to be consulted on territorial matters, his opinion valued and respected. Felicity became known in her own right, not just as Thomas's wife, but as a shrewd businesswoman and a pillar of the growing community. When Fort Garland began the process of establishing a proper school, Felicity was instrumental in making it happen, donating money and time to ensure the children of the valley would have access to education. She never forgot what it was like to have nothing, to be dismissed and looked down upon, and she made it her mission to help others who found themselves in similar circumstances. Sarah Whitmore, who had been so cruel at their first meeting, eventually married a banker from Denver and moved away. But not before she approached Felicity at a town social and offered a grudging apology. "I was wrong about you," Sarah said stiffly. "You have proven to be a woman of substance and character. I should not have judged you so harshly." Felicity accepted the apology with grace, understanding that it took courage to admit being wrong. "Thank you for saying so. I hope you find happiness in Denver." Thomas, watching the exchange from across the room, felt a surge of pride in his wife. She had grown so much from the frightened, defensive woman he had met behind the mercantile. Now she stood tall and confident, secure in herself and her place in the world. Their children grew up strong and happy, knowing they were loved beyond measure. William inherited his father's skill with horses and his mother's head for business. Margaret was bright and curious, always asking questions and demanding to know how things worked. Young James was the most like Felicity, quiet and observant but with a core of steel that made him formidable despite his gentle demeanor. When William turned 18, he began taking on more responsibility at the ranch, preparing to eventually take over the operation from Thomas. It was a bittersweet moment for Thomas, realizing his eldest was grown, but also a proud one. He and Felicity had raised good children, kind and capable and ready to make their own marks on the world. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Thomas surprised Felicity with a trip to Denver. They had been to the city before on business, but never just the two of them, and never for pleasure. They stayed in a fancy hotel, ate at elegant restaurants, and attended the theater, something Felicity had always wanted to do but never had the opportunity. "This is wonderful," she said as they walked back to the hotel one evening, her arm linked through his. "But I have to admit, I miss the ranch. I miss our children and our home." "Me too," Thomas agreed. "Fancy as this is, nothing compares to sitting on our porch watching the sunset over the mountains. We have built something really special, have we not, our life together? We have, and I would not change a single moment of it." Felicity smiled up at him. "Not even the part where you married a homeless woman on a whim. Especially not that part. That was the best decision I ever made." They returned to the ranch a few days later to a warm welcome from their children and the ranch hands. The house felt like home in a way the fancy Denver hotel never could, filled with the sounds and smells of their daily life. That evening, after the children were in bed, Thomas and Felicity sat on the porch watching the sun set, just as they had done thousands of times before. The sky turned red and gold, painting the mountains in fire just as it had that first day Thomas brought Felicity home. "Do you remember what you said to me that day?" Thomas asked. "When I offered you my name." "I said I did not deserve it," Felicity replied softly. "I believed that with my whole heart." "Do you still believe it?" She was quiet for a moment, considering. "No, I have learned that deserving has nothing to do with it. Life is not about getting what we deserve. It is about accepting grace when it is offered and working to be worthy of the gifts we are given." "And have you done that? Been worthy of the gifts?" "I have tried. Every single day I have tried to be the wife you deserve, the mother our children need, the woman I always wanted to be." Felicity leaned her head on Thomas's shoulder. "I hope that is enough. It is more than enough. You are more than enough." Thomas wrapped his arm around her. "You are everything, Felicity, everything I never knew I needed." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The ranch settled into its evening quiet, the sounds of cattle lowing in the distance and horses moving in the corral. It was peaceful and perfect, the culmination of 20 years of hard work and fierce love. "I want to grow old with you," Felicity said suddenly. "I want to watch our children have children, see our family grow and spread. I want to spend every remaining day of my life right here with you." "That can be arranged," Thomas said with a smile. "I do not plan on going anywhere." Promise me we will always have this, that we will never take each other for granted." "I promise. I will love you until my last breath, Felicity Dalton, and probably beyond that." The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges as they always did. Margaret married a teacher from Denver and moved to the city, though she visited often. James decided to pursue law, studying in Colorado Springs before returning to Fort Garland to practice. William married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread and began managing more and more of the Dalton ranch operations. Thomas and Felicity became grandparents, delighting in the role and spoiling their grandchildren shamelessly. The house that had once held their own children's laughter now rang with a new generation's joy. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors from all over the valley attended, celebrating the couple who had become such an integral part of the community. There were speeches and toasts, stories and laughter, an outpouring of affection that left both Thomas and Felicity overwhelmed. "I never imagined this," Felicity said to Thomas as they danced together under the stars. "When you found me behind that store, I never could have dreamed that my life would turn out like this. I am glad I could help make your dreams come true. You did more than that. You gave me dreams to begin with. Before you, I was just surviving. You showed me how to actually live." Thomas pulled her closer, moving slowly to the music. "We showed each other. That is what love is supposed to do." As they swayed together in the moonlight, surrounded by their family and friends, Felicity felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. For Thomas, who had seen her worth when she could not. For her children, who had given her purpose and joy beyond measure. For this life they had built together from nothing but faith and determination. "I love you," she whispered against Thomas's chest, "more than I have words to express. I love you too. Always have, always will." The party continued late into the night, but eventually the guests went home and the children went to bed. Thomas and Felicity were left alone on their porch, watching the stars wheel overhead just as they had done so many times before. "Another 30 years?" Thomas asked, only half joking. "At least," Felicity replied. "I am not done with you yet, Thomas Dalton." "Good, because I am not done with you either." They stayed there until the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, holding hands and talking quietly about everything and nothing. About the past they had overcome and the future they still had ahead. About their children and grandchildren, the ranch and the land, all the threads that wove together to create the tapestry of their shared life. When they finally went inside to sleep, they did so wrapped in each other's arms, exactly as they had been for the past 30 years. And in the morning, they would wake up together and start another day of their extraordinary, ordinary life. The ranch continued to thrive under William's management, growing and evolving with the changing times. Thomas officially retired from active ranching when he turned 60, though he still helped out when needed and offered advice that William wisely heeded. Felicity continued her community work, establishing a fund to help women in difficult circumstances find their footing. "I was that woman once," she told the board when they questioned the need. "Alone and desperate with nowhere to turn. If I can help even one person avoid that fate, it will be worth every penny." The fund became one of her greatest legacies, helping dozens of women over the years. Some found jobs and housing, others received education or training. A few found their own versions of what Felicity had found: love and new beginnings in the most unexpected places. As Thomas and Felicity entered their 70s, they began to slow down, spending more time at home and less on the road. But their love never diminished, never faded into comfortable companionship. They still held hands, still kissed like newlyweds, still found joy in each other's company. "How did we get so lucky?" Thomas asked one evening as they sat on the porch, their children and grandchildren visiting for Sunday dinner. "We made our own luck," Felicity replied. "You offered kindness when you did not have to, and I was brave enough to accept it. Everything else grew from those two simple choices." "Best choices I ever made." "Mine too." They watched their family laugh and play in the yard, 4 generations now with the arrival of their first great-grandchild. The legacy they had created together, built on a foundation of love and trust and unwavering commitment. On a crisp autumn morning in their 75th year, Thomas woke to find Felicity already up, standing at the bedroom window and looking out at the mountains. He joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How grateful I am. For you, for this life, for every single moment we have shared." She leaned back against him. "I spent so much time when I was young feeling like I did not deserve happiness. Now I know that happiness is not something you deserve or earn. It is something you choose every single day. And you choose to be happy. I choose to be grateful. The happiness follows naturally from that." Felicity turned to face him. "I choose you, Thomas Dalton, today and every day for as long as we have left. I choose you too, always." They stood there in the morning light, holding each other as they had done for over half a century. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life and a love that would endure long after they were gone. When Felicity passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 83, Thomas grieved deeply, but without regret. They had been married for 56 years, and every single one of them had been a gift. She left behind 3 children, 9 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren, all of whom had been shaped by her strength and kindness. Thomas lived for 2 more years, staying active and involved in his family's lives. He never remarried, content with the memories of the great love he had known. On the anniversary of the day he first saw Felicity behind the mercantile, he would ride into Fort Garland and stand in that alley, remembering the frightened woman who had become his everything. When his own time came, Thomas died surrounded by his family, his last words a whispered, "I am coming, Felicity." They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names and the dates of a life well lived. And though they were gone, their legacy lived on in the family they had created and the community they had helped build. The Dalton Ranch continued to prosper for generations, and the fund Felicity established continued to help women in need. In Fort Garland, a plaque was installed behind the old mercantile building, marking the spot where a cowboy had offered his name to a homeless woman. And she had said, "I do not deserve this," not knowing that she was about to embark on the greatest love story their corner of Colorado had ever known. Their story became legend in the valley, told and retold around dinner tables and campfires. The tale of Thomas Dalton, who saw a woman in need and chose compassion over judgment. The tale of Felicity Caldwell, who was brave enough to accept help and wise enough to recognize love when it was offered. But more than a legend, their story was a testament to the transformative power of kindness, the strength of the human spirit, and the enduring nature of true love. They had started with nothing but hope and determination, and they had built a legacy that would last forever. And in the end, that was all anyone could really ask for: to love and be loved, to make a difference in the world, and to leave it better than they found it. Thomas and Felicity Dalton had done all of that and more, proving that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simplest acts of human kindness.